All right, take two. So there's three things I want to do. Well, four things. Three things I want to cover in the video, four things I want to do in total. The first thing is make this shorter than the last video. The second thing is clarify some things that really should have been said in the first video. And then talk about this model, which is going to be kind of positive. Which, if you're looking at it and then you remember what I said about about her in the last video, you're probably going to wonder, but just hear me out, and then talk about the locomotive in general, the prototype. So the first thing is sort of a apology to Hornby and an explanation about where I am mentally and why. Firstly, if you're Catholic, pray for me. Secondly, someone needs to smack me to be more realistic. So firstly, I was unfair to Hornby. Now, when I mentioned Rapido in the video, I kind of said, high price, but high quality, high spec. Well, this is a Rapido 6-wheel SECR brake van. This is a very detailed bit of kit. I kind of wish it had, like the Toad, a removable roof. Unfortunately, it doesn't. I don't think it's meant to be removed. And it's a very high-spec wagon, bearings on all the axles and whatnot. But at the time that I recorded that first video, these weren't here. There's three of them here. They were on the way back to me from Rapido after having been mended. So the problem was ultimately the center axle. The center axle was too wide. The back-to-back was too tight, and that was causing derailment on those picosecond radius and intermittent and on these old Atlas points. And now they're back. These three work great. And one kind of has problems there, but that's not so much the point as it is there's kind of a jump at the join between the curve and the point, and that's a really bad section and it kind of needs to come out. But other than that, they work great on every other point. Probably not this one, but that's an even worse version of that. So yeah, no articles of rolling stock I have work on this. So that's the correction. That's the apology I need to make to Hornby, because I kind of set up unrealistic expectations, and that I had no problems with these. Do I still have? You know what? That has all my personal address on it. So yeah, I'm not going to share that, but I can prove to you, being very careful as to what's shown in the frame, Rapido Trains UK. RT UK, International USA. Okay. Should have that meant something to someone. So yeah, unfair to Hornby for me to kind of give Rapido a pass with these, when I'm not giving him a pass with these. Now, it's not so much my defense, because this is a problem. This is not a realistic expectation. Flying Scotsman is my favorite locomotive. Yes, I know that's kind of a basic thing to say, but whatever. You have to admit, fame aside, she is a gorgeous profile for a locomotive. I mean, Pacifics in general have eloquent outlines, but her, the A1s and A3 specifically. But I have this sort of problem where I kind of expect perfection out of something that I like the most. So how this manifested when I was really big into Legos was that I thought I wanted two copies of every set. I would have one copy that I would play with and build and do whatever, and then another copy that would just stay in this box and be perfect forever. which fortunately, back then I didn't have control over my money. My mother and father were very smart, and most of the money that I got went into my savings account. So, you know, but now how that kind of translates to the present is, and for the past over a year, I've had this grand design, is that I want eventually a perfect static model of Flying Scotsman, that preferably 1924 British Empire exhibition, although actually if I believe she had just the crest and LNER 4472 on the tender, but you know, the crest and her Great Northern Loading Gauge condition. I believe that's accurate. If that's accurate, then that version. But a static model, true scale, the wheels, no compromises to make it a working model, just a model that you can put on display in a museum. It doesn't matter if it's double O scale or British O scale or gauge 1. That's my ultimate goal. But for some reason, despite the fact that that's the ultimate goal, and that's what, you know, ultimately I'll have to get commissioned when I finish college and get a job, you know, the prospect of a job that can support a family on a single income. You know, that's the hope anyways. That's what I'm going to have to do then. But for some reason, I have this deep burning desire that everything relating to Flying Scotsman that I buy should be perfect. And that's not me trying to make an excuse, that's me trying to subtly ask for your help, because that's not healthy. Because, you know, I still maintain that the glue here and there is unacceptable. But let's be honest here, even if it was just a tiny little blip in the lining here, I would kind of be upset. Not upset enough to make that video, but upset. And, you know, on the one hand, from an objective standpoint, yeah, paying over 200 pounds in my case, or 360 pounds at the full RRP for some people, that would be unacceptable. If it was this, and that was the quality issue, I wouldn't complain, but I'll come on to her. So that's my apology to Hornby on 2 accounts. The first account is not mentioning that Rapido I've actually had issues with before, and that was wrong of me, so I apologize. The second is kind of an explanation as to why I was particularly upset about this, but why I wasn't really upset enough to make a video about this. But once again, we'll get to her. And then to clarify my college situation, because it was kind of ambiguous, my finance situation. I'm a college student who lives at home and goes to a community college, and the only reason I had to pay for classes last semester was because I go more than full-time and my scholarship doesn't cover more than full-time. So, and I wanted to knock out that class. So that is, so that's the explanation of my finance. I'm not, you know, so yeah, that is my explanation. So I don't want anyone to construe it as anything more or less than that. But yeah, okay. Already 9 minutes in, so I gotta be 28 minutes. This is gonna be a real challenge because I got two things more to cover. So the first thing, 9 minutes and 10 seconds, gotta remember that for the timestamp now. Okay, so the first thing about the Thompson A2-3 that I want to cover is my kind of semi-original thought about these locomotives and the whole Thompson is anti-Gresley narrative. So, I'm sure most of you will know that the A2-3 is a production version of the A2-2, which itself was a rebuild of the Gresley P2. If you're wondering what happened to A2-1, that was the last 4 Gresley V2s built with a front bogie to kind of fix the issue with the pony trucks that the V2s had, and also to, you know, put in Thompson's 3 sets of wall charts as opposed to Gresley's conjugated valve gear, which was overcomplicated for the war. Okay. But then, after Thompson, Peppercorn modifies this design and makes his A2, and this is what history just calls the Peppercorn A2. And then he enlarges that into the Peppercorn A1, so as not to confuse the Gresley A1, but by that point, I believe they'd all been either rebuilt into A3s or there were still some A10s kicking around. Thompson having reclassified the remaining A1s as A10s, so as to avoid confusion. Now, my point that I'm going to make, is that there was a contender by Gresley or Thompson. Thompson had a prototype production A1, a prototype A1. That was his rebuild of Great Northern, which and really, if you set aside the look of the thing, it really was a Super A4 with Thompson's front end, with 3 sets of wall shirts. And, you may say, oh, well, obviously it couldn't be, it looks so ugly, but mechanically that's what she was. Now, if we lived in an alternate world where the LNER's mandatory retirement age was 68 or something, as opposed to 65, then what we most likely would have seen, and of course, Thompson could have changed his mind, had certain circumstances changed or whatever, but had history carried down the path that we think it would have, Thompson's production A1 would have been a production version of the Great Northern rebuild, A1/1, which, if we count her as a generation unto herself, is only 1 generation removed from a thoroughbred Gresley Pacific. Now, that doesn't seem like something that how do I put this? Someone who really hated Gresley, doesn't seem like someone who really hated Gresley would do, right? Because fundamentally, it was still like an A4 boiler, and it was from here back, it was still Gresley. It's just that the front end, and the motion was Thompson, and it looked ugly because it's a rebuild from the ground up, basically, during a time of austerity, and you can't streamline it because we need those resources elsewhere. Thank you very much. So his A1, had he built it, would have been 1 generation removed. The Peppercorn A1 is, as I said, a enlarged version of Peppercorn's A2, which is a update of Thompson's A2, which is a update of the A2, or update, which is a production version of the A2/2, and then we get to a Gresley purebred design. So Peppercorn, who no one really accuses of being anti-Gresley, and I'm not accusing him of being anti-Gresley here, I'm just, he chose to develop his A2 into the A1 as opposed to developing Thompson's A1/1 prototype, which, considering that I don't know of any particular faults with the Peppercorn A1s, I can't criticize his decision there. I'm not an engineer. I think that, from a look standpoint, at the very least, which is the only thing I'm at least semi-qualified to judge on, I think that the Peppercorn A1s look quite nice. But that's the thing. Thompson's production A1, if he had stayed around at the company long enough to make it, in all probability, would have been a Super A4. Probably unstreamlined, but even after the war, there was still austerity. Apparently, the RCTS, I believe it recounts that they didn't want to name the A1s originally, the Peppercorn A1s, because of money problems. British Railway, wanted to save money. So that is the my sort of thought there, that had Thompson had his A1, it would have basically been a Grizzly design, except with his 3 sets of wall shirts. So now for the model, and this is sort of the point. Quality wise, this thing is 10 times worse than this. If I had to choose that all future models will either have this level of quality problems or this level of quality problems, you bet I'm taking this every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Well, I avoid buying models on Sunday if I can at all avoid it, but you know, this thing has, but despite that, my anger and frustration was more with this gal, than it was with this gal. But let me just show you. The phone camera is going to cast a shadow over the boiler, but hopefully you can see the join line. A lot of these had wonky smoke deflectors. I am very fortunate that mine were not. But the real weird quality problem, I haven't heard anyone have any problems as bad as the one I did, but the tender wheels were so loose in their gauging that it would derail on the straight, which I wish I had taken a video of. I have a photo in my phone somewhere of me having disassembled all the wheels, but I don't have I don't have any videos, because I wasn't going to send this back to Hatton's because by the time for a replacement, because by the time I got there, all of them had sold out. And I think by the time I had gotten this one delivered, they all had sold out. So Hatton's had a sale. I believe this was the summer of 23, spring of 23. I was wrapping up, or had wrapped up, my first semester of college. I started in a winter semester, which is kind of unusual, but whatever. And part of the English class is a prereq. I'm into HVAC now. I didn't know that at the time, but you know, whatever. The paper I wrote, the final argumentative sort of paper that I wrote, it didn't have to be argumentative, but I chose an argumentative paper, was about the LNER Pacifics. The full fat version of the paper had every LNER Pacific, tender Pacific, and not the, what do you call it? Not the tank engines. The edition of the RCTS split the tank engines into a separate book, and you know, their stories is kind of separate anyways. So but Simon A.C. Martin's book about Thompson was my primary source, and I was kind of, you know, really excited for Thompson. So I picked this up. I had the choice. I got on the sale early enough to either choose between Edward Thompson or Chamazere. Had I chose Chamazere, I would have saved a whole tenner, but I like Thompson, so I chose Edward Thompson. I don't know why. It'd be interesting to see if there was anyone who worked at Hatton's and was involved in that sale, why there was a price difference. I don't know. I don't know. But either way, 119 pounds minus, I believe, 20% for the VAT. That's a pretty good deal. And I knew going in that this was not going to be a particularly beautiful model. I had seen Flying Scots video on his. I had seen the retail photo, and I believe even the Hatton's retail photo, the smoke deflector on its example that it showed was wonky, which is kind of hilarious, actually. You know, you think a retailer, you know, pull out a good one, like, yeah, this is what these look like, and take pictures of that, but no, which either suggested that the Hatton's employee was so apathetic to Thompson Pacifics that he just pulled out the first one, or he pulled out 2 or 3, and that was the best one he got. I don't know which version of the story is funnier. I don't know which is actually true, but I'd like to imagine that that's kind of how that happened. So I knew this was not going to be good, but you know, when is anyone else going to make one of these? You know, maybe 20 years from now, Hornby or someone else will do these. But if I wanted one of these, I would have to get a kit. Um, so, yeah. And I had to say that because this is not my favorite class of locomotive, because my expectations were so low going in, I don't hate her. I hated having to fix her out of the box. The pony was under gauge, but not quite as, so I had to be gentle over points. But yeah, that was not fun. But you know, she is a smooth. Oh, that's backwards. But she is a smooth runner. And this is on. Hold on. This is on not the cleanest of track. And with a load of, let's see, 10 coaches, 10, well, would you count the dynamometer cars coach technically? I don't know, 9 railroad teaks and a Rapido dynamometer car. The only non-Hornby thing in the train, 1946 to 1949 sort of dynamometer car. So this is actually perfect for this and this. So yeah, smooth runner, which isn't necessarily a given because this does not have a flywheel, which is kind of a surprise. Well, it would be a surprise at the full RP. I wasn't surprised at the slightest. But no, she performs very well. It just goes to show you that a good motor is a good motor. I'm kind of eating my words with the performance here, but that's just because, you know, slow speed, track isn't the cleanest, and holding a heavy load. But no, if you're wondering what's underneath there, that's my sort of, I need to get decent shelving, but until I can get something with a door over it, I need to protect the rolling stock that's under there. I have rolling stock under there, and I need to eventually clean and dust off all my American stuff, which